Mrs. Mackenzie. I'm 8 years old, going to be 9, I think, around next month. I got my first beehive around on my 6th birthday.
Jim Withers. I own and operate Withers Mountain Honey Farm. I retired from General Motors back in 2006 and was looking for something to go after for a new career. I found beekeeping accidentally. I was a bicycle racer, still race a little bit, and I used honey as an energy replacement as I was on my long training rides. And so I thought if I had a couple of beehives, I wouldn't have to buy so much honey. And that's when I got my first beehives, and I became fascinated with honeybees and the lives of honeybees. So this is my 15th year of doing this, and I started with 6 nukes. I had no idea what I was doing. I started with 6 nukes. Now I run about 200 beehives. We don't use a whole lot of tools in beekeeping. Really, the only thing you need is a hive tool and a smoker. We have different versions of hive tools, but we use it to be able to move these frames around. Bees use that propolis I was telling you about as a defensive mechanism in the hive to protect them from bacteria and fungus. But they use it also to glue everything together. And so it's really stuck in there, and sometimes it's hard to get these frames out, especially if they've been in there for a while. And so we can use these hive tools to, like this one, we call it a J-hook. I can use it to get underneath here and lift. I try to be careful. I try not to kill my honeybees, mainly because I love them, but also because they emit an alarm pheromone if you squish one. So another thing about the smoke, when we use smoke, is it masks the smell of an alarm pheromone. So if these bees sense danger, they will release a pheromone we call it an alarm pheromone that gets the other bees on defense, and then more of them become defensive. So every now and then, as more and more of them start getting active, you can sort of see sometimes when they're calm and when they're starting to get more active. Every now and then I'll just put a little puff of smoke across the top here and at the entrance in case anybody's releasing alarm pheromone, and that tends to calm them down. So yeah, the main reason I'm wearing a veil, even there's a lot of times in the summer I'd just be out here in shorts and a t-shirt, but I'll generally speaking wear a veil. And the reason for that is when the bees do get defensive and come after you, the first thing you're going to do is go for your face. We suspect, we always try to say that bees are doing this because of that, and that. Most of what we know about bees are things that we suspect. Otherwise, we're anthropomorphizing, right? When we say we know what the bees are thinking. But we do know that they like to go for your face. And the reason we think they do that is because one of their natural predators would be like a bear. And when a bear gets into a hive, it's going in their face first and chewing up the larvae. And about the only effective place that they can attack a bear very well is in his face area, because the fur on a bear's face is much lighter and easier to get through. And we think that they recognize eyes because they do, as you know, like to go for your eyes.
Welcome to Honeybee family. There are 3 types of bees: the queen, the workers, and the drones. In this next section, we will learn about all 3 and their life cycle.
Now this is capped brood. So when the queen lays an egg, it looks like a tiny grain of rice standing up in the bottom of the cell. We won't see any here because the queen left here in the last several days. But it's an egg for 3 days, and After 3 days, it hatches into a larva. We'll get into another colony and find some larvae. I don't think we'll find any here. But the larva looks like a tiny little grub worm in there. And it is a larva for about 6 days. And after that, the nurse bees put a capping on it. This capping is porous so the air can go through there. And underneath that capping, that larva turns into a pupa. It spins a cocoon around itself like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. It's the same process. It will spin a cocoon around itself and go through metamorphosis, where it will turn from a larva into a honeybee.
Oh wait, Uncle Jim.
And after about 12 days of being capped, the honeybee will crawl out and she'll go to work. They typically live, during the summer months, they live 5 or 6 weeks. And when she first hatches out of there, out of that cell, she becomes a nurse bee first. So the first thing she'll do is she'll go and tank up on pollen. Bees store pollen in the comb. Perhaps we'll find some as we're going through here. They store pollen in the comb, and pollen is their source of proteins and vitamins and minerals. That's really what bee food is pollen. So she will tank up on pollen, and she will either store it if she's going into winter, or during this time of the year, it will enter into her system and become something called vitellogenin, which goes into her pharyngeal glands, hypopharyngeal glands in her head, which produces royal jelly. So she's a nurse bee first for about 10 days to 2 weeks. She's a nurse bee. And then as more and more bees hatch into the brood nest area, she'll sort of get crowded out and become a house bee, where she will do things like, well, when she's about 10 days to 2 weeks old, she starts producing wax out of her wax glands. That's what all this comb is made out of. It's made out of their bodies. Wax come right out of their bodies. And they build all this comb. So, and she does things like, she's also the one who is curing the honey, adding enzymes to it, receiving honey from foragers coming in and taking it and storing it and putting it away.
Smoke them?
Yeah, you can give them a little puff of smoke.
Oh wait.
They do things like they clean up the house, they build the wax, they have mortuary bees which drag out the dead bees. They are, okay, that's enough, just a little bit. We don't want to smoke too much. They stand guard at the entrance. They meet visitors coming to make sure that they're from this hive. So that's basically what they're doing as worker bees. And for the next stage of their life, after being a worker bee, they will become forager bees, at which point they mature and they're the ones who go out and collect nectar and water and pollen and something called propolis, which is like the sap from a tree. And they'll use propolis well, you can see like right here some propolis. They'll use this, they'll line it all around the hive. It's a very sticky substance. But propolis has these great antifungal, antibacterial properties, and they use it to line around the colony. It's their first line of defense against things like bacteria and fungus getting into the hive. Now in this hive, the foraging stage is the last part of their life. They do that until they die. They usually die away from the hive, because at some point their wings wear down, their muscles wear down, because they give up all the protein back to the colony. That's a long biology lesson all by itself. But at some point they get to the point where their muscles won't fly them anymore, and that's usually when they're out there in the field. That's why we say the bees work themselves to death. They just keep going. Their nature is to just bring in and store honey as much as possible.
It's a drone.
Why can you hold this drone?
Because they can't sting you because they don't have stingers, really.
And what is a drone?
It's a male bee.
That's the boy bees.
You can see his wings going.
So she can hold them, doesn't have a stinger. Very cool.
As soon as I let him go, he's gonna fly away.
All right, let him go. Let's see what happens. Oh, he
Maybe
likes
not
you.
this time.
There he goes.
You see a blue dot, holler out. There she is. I kind of painted her really well.
Here. Where?
Can you see that blue dot?
Oh yeah.
See the queen
see
running
her.
around there?
She has-
Careful you don't trip
Her
over
leg
the
is
queen.
blue too.
And Mackenzie, come
Don't
over on
put
this
your
side so I can get
don't put your shadow
your
on.
light.
There she is.
Her
You
leg
see
is
she's got a
blue,
really
too.
large abdomen. Yeah, I paint. This is what they bring in nectar from the flowers. They collect nectar from flowers.
Like it's still a little watery, but it's very sweet.
Yeah, and so as they bring it in, they're going to cure it down. They're going to add, like I said, they add enzymes. That's what a bee's doing right there. She's adding enzymes to it, and she may be blowing bubbles in it. They'll do things. They'll fan it. What they're doing is they're acting like a dehumidifier. They're taking moisture out of here. They keep taking moisture out, and it gets thicker and thicker and sweeter until it's finally honey.
Yes.
Yes,
And
and
this-
Mackenzie's just eating it all. So, when for us, for the world, what's very important about honeybees and other pollinators is that they pollinate. So pollination is the way that new plants come into being. It's the way that things like fruits and vegetables come into being. Without pollination, fruit doesn't occur, and many vegetables don't occur. So pollination is the act of transferring pollen from one plant to another so that a fruit can be germinated and occur. For example, I have honeybees that live out at Porter's Orchard and Montrose Orchard that are pollinating their apple crops right now. And so they will visit the flower and collect pollen and nectar, and then when they go to the next flower, some of the pollen that's on them will get onto the stamen, I believe it is. There's a pistil on the stamen, one's female, one's male. I get them mixed up. But they transfer pollen onto that, and that germinates, which allows an apple to grow. Without that pollination, without bees or other pollinators moving pollen from one flower to another, there's no apples. And if there's no apples, there's no seeds in the apples. The seeds that are in the apple, the reason for the apple itself is to encourage animals to eat it, and when they eat it, they spread it around so that the seeds get spread around and new trees form. So without that pollination, it's not just that there wouldn't be apples, but there wouldn't be any apple trees. And it's that way. There are actually about 85% of flowering plants in nature require pollination from either an insect, or generally an insect, but bats do some pollination. There's several different insects besides honeybees, but there are over 170,000 species of plants that honeybees pollinate. And there are some 40,000 species of plants that depend almost entirely on honeybees, to the point at which they would fare poorly or even go out of existence without honeybees. So why is that important to us? Well, about a third of the food that we eat is pollinated by honeybees. Things that you don't think about, like when they grow hay and they grow alfalfa for raising cows. There are a lot of seed crops of alfalfa that are pollinated by honeybees, so that we have alfalfa seed to grow more hay for cows. So even your hamburger depends on honeybees. Of course, fruits and vegetables. And it's a multi-billion-dollar industry here in the United States, the agricultural industry. And when you stop and think about all the plants, the 85% of flowering plants that require to be pollinated, if that didn't occur, those plants would go extinct. And if those plants went extinct, there are just a whole chain of animals that depend on those plants besides us. And then there are animals that depend on those animals that depend on those plants. It would be a horrible break in the food chain that would probably be the end of us. So that's why pollination is important. What's interesting about honeybees is we manage them. We don't change them. We haven't made them anything other than what they are. I'm just trying to free that girl from the pollen she was stuck in, or the propolis. So they're still wild animals, but we can manage them and try to keep them healthy. One thing I talk about too, in terms of what you can do to help honeybees, is you can, first of all, get educated. Get educated about what is good and bad for our environment. In terms of like your house, one of the things that stumps me is that at some point back in our history, we decided that in order to keep up with the Joneses, we had to have these manicured golf course lawns. And I get it, you know, it's pretty and all of that, but it does absolutely nothing for our environment. You know, we put all these poisons to kill what we call weeds or kill pests, and it's really not good for the environment. So if you could encourage your parents to let those dandelions grow, that would be a helpful thing. And plant some flowers, you know. One of the things I like to do every now and then is plant just a wildflower bed where I'll till up a little piece of property and just scatter wildflowers around that are good for pollinators. So yeah, just be aware, get educated. But yeah, I just love it. And the biggest thing for me is there are times by the end of the year, around October, I am so over taking care of honeybees because it's been a long, hard summer. But whenever I think about not keeping bees anymore, I just can't imagine it. I just can't imagine not having something that really is so fulfilling, because it feels to me like what I'm doing really matters. And if you want your life to matter, find something that does matter. And to me, taking care of honeybees and feeling like it's very beneficial to our environment just feels like it's something good to do. And I try as much as I can to pass it on and encourage other people. Bye guys.
Get away right away at Genesee County Parks. For more, visit GeneseeCountyParks.org.